Alrighty. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. There's Rocky sleeping on his fish. Yeah, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm awake. There was something outside there just now, rummaging around, making some noise. I don't know what it was. But anyway, seeing as how I'm awake, I'm going to tell a story because, well, I'm awake and I feel like telling a story. And this story just came into my head. It's a memory that I have going back now into the 1980s. It's an incident that occurred in the 1980s. And I'm going to tell it to you now. It's a little bit frightening what happened, and it could have ended really bad. And, it's kind of a story of, young people doing something stupid, also fueled by alcohol, that could have went very badly. I mean, somebody could have lost their life just in a split second, Anyway, I'll tell you the story. I had some friends in high school. I had a friend by the name of Rick, and I had another friend by the name of Chris, and I had another friend by the name of Jamie. I'm not going to say their last names. It doesn't matter what their last names are. But Rick's mom was married to a man named Glenn. That's going to figure into this story anyway. Glenn figures into this story even though Glenn wasn't there when this happened, and Glenn would not have been too impressed had he known what had happened. But basically, Glenn was Rick's stepfather. And Glenn was a hunter. That figures into the story too. Glenn used to go out deer hunting and so on, during deer season, which is in the fall. Anyway, Rick's mom and his stepdad, Glenn, they went away for the weekend. And of course, we were in high school. We decided we'd have a party at Rick's house. And so we did. Now, I wasn't a drinker myself, but these parties, alcohol would be there. It wasn't that hard to get alcohol in those days. They've cracked down on a lot of things since then, but in those days it was still fairly easy to get alcohol and to get yourself into a crap ton of trouble in a hurry anyway. It wasn't that hard to do back then. Now they've gone the other way, of course, and they've tightened things up to the point where it's equally ridiculous, but in the opposite direction. And the same is true with guns, with firearms. If you had a firearm back then, you could just have it even sitting in a rack in your living room, on your living room wall. And again, that factors into this story. I'm at this party, and there's a bunch of us there. It's at Rick's house. Chris is there, and Jamie's there, and there's a bunch of other people there, too. But the ones involved in this story are myself, and Rick, and Chris, and Jamie. I just happened to be standing in the kitchen, and the living room was off the kitchen in this house. And I see Jamie backing up, going backwards out the living room door into the kitchen. And Chris has Glenn's hunting rifle. And he's pointing it at Jamie, and he's backing Jamie out of the living room into the kitchen. Now, he's doing this in kind of a playful way. He's playing with this gun, with this rifle of Glenn's. Anyway, I saw that, and I was kind of known, I guess, as a bit of a stick in the mud. See, I was on my own at 15. I was working full-time in a wire factory, paying bills and so on. So I had my own car at 16 and so on. So I was kind of like, I was more like a 35-year-old man, than say a 17-year-old guy or whatever. And I see this. And I never hunted myself, but I had lots of friends who hunted. And I knew about certain things that had to do with guns. I understood there were certain rules with regard to how you handled a firearm. And so I see this, and of course it freaks me out a bit, And I said to Chris, because he's backing Jamie out of the living room with this rifle, I just looked at him and I very seriously, I said, do you intend to shoot him? Of course, I knew he didn't, but this is what I said. I said, do you intend to shoot him? And when I said that, Chris just spun around and pointed the thing at me. So now he's pointing it at me. And he says, no, I don't intend to shoot him. What a thing to say. And I said, well, you're pointing a gun at him. I should never point a firearm at anything you don't intend to shoot. Well, I had heard that from people I knew who hunted, and I said that. Never point a firearm at anything you don't intend to shoot. Well, when I said that, Chris says, well, it's not loaded. And I said, you don't know that. And Chris says, well, Glenn wouldn't be too happy with you, saying that he would be that stupid that he would leave a loaded weapon up on the wall, or whatever, in the gun rack. And I said that firearm could be loaded for any number of reasons. In those days, there were a lot of people kept a loaded rifle in their house to deal with intruders. Somebody broke into a house in the middle of the night. If you were a burglar and you were breaking into people's houses in the middle of the night to rob them, in those days, there was a good chance you'd get shot, because people did keep loaded weapons around and stuff. That wasn't unheard of. There were people had a loaded gun in the glove compartment of the car. I remember some old Dodges and Plymouths that had the glove compartment in the center of the dashboard. So, the driver could literally just reach down to his right and open the glove compartment. There were older Plymouths and Dodges that were built that way. And that was a running joke. We used to say that's so the driver can get to his gun easily. So, it wasn't like it is now where everything is restricted and you're required to keep your firearms in a metal safe, in a steel safe that's locked. And then you're required to keep your ammunition in another safe and so on. It wasn't like that back then. Anyway, I told him, I said, that gun could be loaded for any number of reasons. And I said, and you don't know it isn't. And I said, and I'll tell you what, I said, what Glenn wouldn't be happy with is you playing around with his gun. I said, that is not a toy and it doesn't belong to you. I said, put it back where the owner left it. I said, stop playing around with things. Stop messing with things that don't belong to you. I said, you do this all the time. I said, you're constantly effing around with stuff that doesn't belong to you. I said, you have no respect for other people's property. And that was true. He was like that. We had one friend that had an old car. A lot of us had old cars from the 50s and 60s and stuff back then, because they were cheap. Nobody wanted them, and you could buy a car like that for $200 back then. Now they're worth a fortune. Back then, they were just an old used car. And we had one friend that had this car, and it had the old cars had a bent seat. Well, he was riding somewhere in a carload anyway with this guy, and he found a black permanent marker. Now, this car had a white vinyl interior. So the back of the bench seat was white. Right from one side of the car to the other, there was this big white canvas. I guess that's how Chris saw it, I guess, anyway. And he found a permanent marker back there. And what did he do? He drew pictures all over the back, obscene pictures. Pictures of people doing things with each other and stuff, having different engaged in different sex acts and things. This is what he drew all across the back of that seat, the back of the front bench seat. This is the kind of stuff he would do. And that's why I said that to him. I said, you're always effing around with stuff that doesn't belong to you. I said, you have no respect for other people's property. I said, put that back where you got it. I said, it's not yours and it's not a toy. It's a deadly weapon. I said, put it back where you got it. So he did. He grumbled. He called me an old lady and, oh, you're nothing but an old lady. You act just like an old lady stuff, but he put it back. So that was good. Anyway, nothing else was said about it until at some point after that. Oh, I hear the coyotes out there. I don't know if the microphone will pick them up, but they're out there. They're yapping and howling and stuff. I don't even know if the microphone's picking up my voice right now. This tablet is horrible for that. But anyway, at some point after that, I ran into our friend Rick, at whose house the party was held, whose stepfather, Glenn, owned the rifle in question. And we're just talking, like friends do when they meet up somewhere, and they happen to just meet up by chance. And in the middle of the conversation, he says, oh, hey, you know that rifle that you made Chris put back up on the gun rack? Well, yeah, what about it? He said, you were right, it was loaded. If he had pulled the trigger, it would have fired. And then he told me the story. What had happened was Glenn had been out deer hunting, and he came home, and he was getting ready to clean his rifle before he put it away. And just as he was doing that, just as he was getting ready to start doing that, somebody came to the door. Well, he just laid the rifle up on the gun rack in the living room, and he went and answered the door, and he forgot about the gun. He just clean forgot about it. He was dealing with somebody at the door, and it just slipped his mind. And then several weeks went by, and that gun was laying up on the gun rack. Glenn hadn't been out hunting again or anything, and it was just there, and he'd forgot that he hadn't cleaned it. And then one day, in the meantime, we had this party, and then one day, at some point after this party, he remembered. He said, oh, damn, I was going to clean my gun. I never did do that. So he took it down off the gun rack, and he started to clean it, and he found he found a cartridge in the chamber. Well, a cartridge in the chamber means that it was ready to fire. All it was left to do was to pull the trigger to cause the firing pin to hit the back of the cartridge. And it would fire. Whatever was in there was going to come out. And now imagine getting shot by a deer rifle at close range. A rifle that will take down a buck at a distance. And you're getting shot by that thing at a distance of about 3 feet. Which is about how far away Chris was from Jamie and how far he was away from me when I said when he spun around and pointed it at me. Now, he had no idea it was loaded. He was just acting the fool, but he didn't know. I mean, it would have been devastating for him had he actually pulled the trigger and it fired and he ended up killing somebody. That would have just been life altering. Would have been life ending for somebody, either for Jamie or for me, and it would have been life altering for him in so many ways, and not just because of the consequences he'd have to face for doing that, but because of his conscience. Because he wasn't really a bad guy. He was just an idiot. When it come to certain things, he was a real idiot. He just did a lot of stupid things. And he definitely didn't have respect for other people's property. And so, anyway, this is what happened. Luckily, he didn't pull the trigger. I think we may have had an angel at that party that night watching over us. I mean, when I told him that he shouldn't point that thing at anybody, he might have said it's not loaded, see, and pulled the trigger to prove it wasn't. And of course, he would have proven it was. And he was pointing it at me at that point, so that goes through my mind. That's all it would have taken, is for him to pull the trigger to prove to me that it wasn't loaded. He's pointing it at me. Anyway, bottom line is we were all very fortunate that night. It could have ended a lot differently. And it was a good lesson anyway. It really was. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm going to try to go back to sleep because it is just like 3 o'clock in the morning here. It's insane to be up at this hour. But yeah, all right. We'll talk to you later. I hope you're having a good night or day or wherever you're at, wherever you are, because of course we cover many time zones with this whole interwebs. And we'll talk to you later.